Well, thank you very much for allowing me to do this in English. What I hope everyone can understand is I do realise I am between finishing this and you guys getting a beer and bratwurst, so I'll be quick. So I work for Enterprise. So what I'm going to cover today is, very quickly, who are Enterprise, what do we do, why does MaaS and the future of mobility matter for us, the projects we've been involved in at a very high level, not all of them, but just some of them, and then the future of where we think some of this marketplace is going. So this is us in EMEA. We're still a family-owned company based out of the US, but I wanted to give you a picture of the area that I'm looking after. So working with 9,000 team members across Europe and the Middle East, and we've got a fleet of just over 300,000 vehicles as well. This is at a very high level, but this is all the things we do in the business world today. This is important because we also include MaaS in that space. So when we've deployed MaaS as Enterprise, what we've typically done is sold it to a public authority, then they've deployed it for their citizens. So we still treat our customer isn't the citizen, it's the public authority who has the freedom and flexibility to deploy it in the way that they see fit. These are all our business lines globally that we run and operate. They're all relevant. They all serve businesses. They all serve insurance companies. They also serve residents as well. We've also got our car share program as well. We've also got Car Club next to it. And the only reason we have that is for some bizarre reason in the UK, we call it Car Club. The UK often does things differently to the rest of the world. This is another example where we decided to call it something else, but it's entirely the same product. Why does MaaS and future mobility projects matter for us? We recognize as a business that we're going to have to change the way we operate. There's going to be a shift away from ownership to usership. In both the corporate world and the retail world, it's going to become a big movement towards multimodality. So what we've increasingly done is said, we're really good at managing fleet and running those assets. We're not very good at technology, and we're not ever going to deploy new mobility services. So what we have done across all our projects in Europe is worked with partners who are good at technology and partners who deploy other mobility services. And that's where we've had our best success. We haven't tried to do it all ourselves. So hopefully what I can do is show you an example of that with a video. Now, will this video work? Does anyone know if the video here works? It's meant to play a video. If it doesn't, it's fine. There's a really good video. If anyone wants it, I can send it afterwards. This is an example where I wanted to talk about, we provided rental cars and car share to the Highlands of Scotland. Now, the Highlands of Scotland is about the size of Belgium and about as rural as you can get. We then decided to work with our Mobility as a Service partner, who is Mobilio, to deploy a white-labeled Mobility as a Service application that integrated public transport, which included ferries, planes, also bikes, cars. It's one of the most comprehensive integrations done where everything's got planning and payment integration. But the reason why I said earlier, we brought in, because we are a mobility provider, we brought in our partners to do the technology rather than try and do it all ourselves. There is a good video, I'll show it you later. But if you can see it, there's a picture of a car share vehicle. But really what I want to show there was our customer had a problem, who was the public authority. We helped them develop a MaaS solution for their citizens, but we did it through using bike providers who were partners and mobility as a service providers as well. And then the second project I just wanted to touch upon was in the West Midlands in the UK. Now, this is where, as the UK was bringing in their equivalent of environmental zones, so clean air zones for the UK, they were looking at ways to help poorer people with higher polluting vehicles move away from owning those vehicles, which is very difficult because if you own high polluting vehicles that are old, they're very cheap, but then you also get hit with the most punitive costs for driving those vehicles in urban areas, which is kind of the wrong way around, really. So if you could buy an EV, you weren't impacted. So the scheme we initially set up was a scrappage scheme where people with high polluting diesel or petrol cars would get £3,000 to spend on other forms of mobility, including car club and rental, because you needed access to a vehicle from time to time, but also public transport. That went live a few years ago, but that started as a journey. So now it was all done on a Swift card, which is their version of an Oyster card, where people could access the services. As we've moved that forward, we're now running the biggest mobility as a service program in the UK for our partners, where we're going to turn that physical card into a digital application that will provide mobility as a service for the UK's second biggest region, which will go live next summer, and we're really excited about that. Just to conclude with this point of what's going to happen next, the reality is nobody knows, and if you'd asked people 7 years ago, even experts, they'd have got the answer wrong. I think, particularly in the mobility as a service place, we've seen consolidation, but that doesn't mean it's not positive. I think this is no longer a pure sort of public authorities trying to push mobility as a service on their citizens. I think we're seeing the deployment of this in other sectors. So as businesses have to do ESG reporting, for example, so report on their emissions, they're going to have to change their behaviours. And I do think multimodal applications are ways to do that. We did a survey last year where it was said that 42% of employees, and I'm happy to share this afterwards, want better multimodal travel options for work journeys. And this is across France, Germany, and Spain. So I think what we're going to see is as the corporate world has to change from an emissions perspective, they're going to have to do a bit better. So we increasingly find as a business, we used to speak to fleet managers and companies. More often than not, they're now getting their agenda set by heads of sustainability. So they can't just do what they did before, buy a load of cars, provide them for their employees. They're going to have to change. And I think that's where there's a great opportunity for MaaS. And I expect expansion into other areas as well, other sectors. Increasingly, it's going to become part of human resources. We've seen in some countries that they're introducing mobility budgets for employees where there'll be tax incentives. I know in Germany that's something in the pipeline. But in addition to that, we're seeing it in planning of both residential and commercial properties. So I think if someone has asked us 7 years ago, what would MaaS be? Everyone would say it was the solution that fixed all the problems. It wasn't in the way it was built, but I think the technology's there. I think increasingly it's all about partnerships with other operators, cities, but also businesses. And I think it's changed quite a lot just in those few years. So I do realise I am between the beer and the barbecue. So that's the end of my PowerPoint. Without the video, I can be quicker. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks for the very short but very interesting pitch. Are there any questions for James Lancaster? Yes.
Thanks. I'm Alexander Casillas from Verkehrsclub Deutschland. Did I understand you right that you say that MaaS will work over Europe only private, or is it a combination by state and private?
A combination. I think in the business world, you might see a different... I don't think it'll be called MaaS. So I think companies will have to provide multimodal or more sustainable transport options to their employees. So I think you'll see the technology similar to MaaS used in the corporate world. When a public authority or a public transport operator wants to deploy MaaS, I think it's very good that they put the air conditioning on and the right market conditions, because that avoids an aggregator model and where people make the wrong decisions. So I think it started out as being a thing deployed by cities or public entities. I think now we're seeing it arise in the private sector, but I think they're perhaps different, if that makes sense.
Hey there, I'm going to challenge you a bit about the MaaS. I know that a lot of companies, especially private ones, are doing the MaaS projects now, right? It's whether your company or others are thinking of putting more modes of transportation. How would you say if the state or the city should regulate it? Because the city's perspective is like more people using bikes, more people using public transportation, less people using cars, even though if it's shared cars. But the idea from your business perspective, is some rules okay or not?
So the way we sell it today to, say, your city, the way we would sell that is we just give you the technology, you do what you want with it. You are the referee, we're not, when it's sold to a public entity. It's probably a little bit different if we went to one of our big corporate customers and they said, we need access to public transport, bikes and cars, they would be the referee. But when we sell, and that's why maybe we see only our role to give it to you, and that's it.
Further questions?
Yeah, hi, Robert Stoll from Porsche Consulting. So you mentioned a little bit the EV program that you had. So my question is, you see all these big rental companies like Sixt or Europcar, they're getting rid of their EVs. So, and maybe this is just a smaller program that you had already, although you mentioned like it's one of the largest one in the UK, but how does actually this current EV wave or reduction in the rental industry affect your entire business?
It's definitely a problem. It's probably one I can answer longer over a beer outside. Is that a good answer?
I think so. Then thank you very much again. A big final applause for James Lancaster.